what helped him and helped us was the fact that the opposition knew that these black men had guns too. And that was more or less a stalemate. They weren't going to, after that, we had no problems whatsoever, none whatsoever.
Welcome to part 2 of our conversation with freedom rider Charles Person. This is Loki Mulholland, and it's time to get uncomfortable.
You know, one of the things that people forget is that a lot of black men went to the army and they came home and they thought that things would be different when they came home. They were not, but they all had guns. And they would stay on their part of their side of town, but many of them were armed. There were many black people who were armed that the whites did not bother, as long as they did that. And they had guns. And I think the deacons were people who had guns and didn't mind showing that they had them. But in the 60s, I knew a lot of men that had guns. I mean, and they couldn't protect everything because that meant war. But there were things that the white people did not go to, knowing that these people shoot back, so we won't bother them. I had people in my own family like that. And so it surprises people. The Freedom Riders were nonviolent. These guys were not.
No. My grandfather was that way. He was, as they would say, he was heavily loaded. I mean, he really kept an arsenal, and he had an old steamer trunk, and he used to keep lots of ammo. And he taught us that all the boys in the family at a very early age, we learned to shoot. You know, I'm an expert with the rifle and sharpshooter with the pistol. My brother's expert, my cousin, all of us were. When we were in the military, we ended up firing, being expert marksmen. So, but I chose to be nonviolent, you know.
So did your mother say, "I told you so"?
No, what mother said was this, you know, I had gotten her permission the night before, you know, we stopped off in Atlanta. So I'd gotten her permission to continue to rise. And I'm glad I did, because no one could have known what was going to happen the next day. So I felt good in my heart, knowing that at least she knew what our mission was. But here's what happened after the Freedom Rides. The reason I ended up in the Marine Corps, my mother was afraid that she knew I was going to stay in the movement, but she figured it would be safer for me in the Army than to stay in the movement. So as to please my mom, since I didn't quite give her the total truth when I first went with the rides, I chose to join the Marine Corps instead. But that was in deference to her, because she knew if I had stayed out, I was going to stay in the movement. There's no way I was going to leave. But I know it was traumatic, because you have to realize we didn't have, we had snail mail in those days. So what happened after the bus was burned and we were beaten, all they got on the 6 o'clock news was, you know, just a snippet of what had happened. And I can imagine, you know, the turmoil she must have gone through until the person I had as my next of kin was Lonnie King, who was the president of the student movement in Atlanta. So they contacted him, and he in turn went and told my mother what had happened so that she would know more precisely what had happened. See, we didn't have a telephone. My mother, we didn't have a telephone, so you couldn't call anyone. So someone had to actually go out to the house to tell them, you know, what had happened to us and that I was okay.
Yeah. My mom's parents didn't even know she was in Mississippi until when she came down the Freedom Rides, and they heard it on the evening news that I think on the radio that she had been arrested in Jackson. So somehow that made it the news all the way back up to Washington, D.C. So,
But it was a slow pace, though. I mean, like I say, you only had the regular news cycle, which was normally you had the 6 evening news at 6 p.m. And of course, you had the late night news, and then you have to wait for the following day. Yeah. So, and things would happen because it was so much going on, and so much violence, and so much absence of police and so forth. So you didn't have a lot of official reports, because a lot of misinformation went out. Like the picture that was taken in Birmingham, a lot of them thought it was James Peck, some said it was some other guy. But yet still, the FBI, who knew and they didn't tell anybody, The way we found out it was me was when I was subpoenaed to testify against the men in the picture. And the reason that they identified me as being the person, and that was why I ended up at their trial, which of course they were exonerated.
All that took place, Anniston and Birmingham took place on Mother's Day.
On Mother's Day, yeah.
And in Birmingham, what was Bull Connor's excuse for why the police weren't there?
This was a Mother's Day, and they were out with their families, with their mothers.
Yeah.
But he had already promised. They found out from the FBI that he had promised the Klan 15 minutes to do whatever they wanted to. And what saved our butts was the fact that it happened during the day, because there were men who had guns. I mean, I think the FBI informant that was in the picture, you could see the pistol hanging out of his pocket. But the thing is, because it was daylight, I think what's really saved us more than anything else. But if it had been evening night, I'm sure somebody would have been killed that day.
Hmm. So what was more dangerous, civil rights in the South or South Vietnam?
Well, in Vietnam, I had a gun. So, I mean, at least there was a balance of power, you know. But in the civil rights movement, I had nothing but songs and prayers.
You were in the Marine Corps.
Yes.
When did you go in?
July of '61.
So the Marine Corps was not integrated either, was it?
Yeah, it was integrated. It had just, wow. It was, well, they had gotten from the Montfort Point Marines. I don't know if you know, that was the first group of Black Marines, the Montfort Point Marines. Well, they had gone beyond that. But one of the reasons I chose the Marine Corps is it had very few senior enlisted and very few senior officers. At that time, we had no Marine general officers. We had Colonel Peterson, who later became the first general. Actually, he ended up being a 2-star general pilot. And I knew that I had a qualification to get a commission, and they dilly-dallied around and stuff. But now it took me 10 years to get a commission, but I finally got my commission. But in boot camp, it was really funny because my DI, he loved the way I could run and shoot and all that stuff. But when he found out I had the highest IQ in the platoon, he was determined to get me out of the platoon. He was going to try to force me out. But had he known, my background he would have known there is no way he could have forced me out of the Marine Corps, because that's where I wanted to be. I chose the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps didn't choose me.
Where did you get your training?
Paris Hollow, yeah.
Did you know Blyden Jackson?
I heard of the name.
He was a DI, but he was a Black guy. I think he was the first one.
Well, there we actually in our series, Commander there has a Black guy, Staff Sergeant, Gunnery Sergeant, and he was awarded the Silver Star in Korea. So it was rough during the time. I mean, the training was great and all that. I mean, it was more rough mentally than physical. I mean, I was in good shape. I've always been active in those days. But the hard part was the mental part. Some of the stuff they take you through. But like I say, it all prepares you for war, and that's, you need that kind of insanity to survive war.
So you said it was easier in Vietnam than in the movement because you at least had a gun. But Vietnam couldn't have been easy.
We were the second group of Marines to go into Vietnam, so you didn't have the massive buildup, and you had the probes and all that kind of stuff. And but it also taught how ill-equipped we were for that war. It was, really, for example, we captured some Vietnamese who were early on. I think about the first week we were there, and they only spoke French. We had no one in the command that spoke French. So my boss, he went out and got myself and a few other Marines who had high school and college French, and we were the interpreters. Now, if you're going to an area where people speak a foreign language, somebody that needs to know how to speak the language. From an official standpoint. But that's one of the things that really perturbed me for a long time. Is that we knew we were going to go to Vietnam. We had been planning for it, and it took us like 5 days by ship to get there. Somebody should have let the command know that these people they don't speak English. We need somebody that can, it's obvious, we're going to write each other notes or something. To me, it just, it was just one of the things that was ill planned. There were other instances where we screwed up big time, but that was one that always stuck out to me because that was when we had first gotten there. And had we students not been there with our high school and college French, I don't know what the heck they would have done.
Well, I'm kind of surprised with high school and college French. You guys didn't start World War III or something.
Well, we were there to to help out, and like you say, they at least they were smart enough to realize that, hey, maybe somebody in the command can speak enough French that they can interpret what these guys are trying to say.
Yeah. So, Vietnam and being in the civil rights is an interesting kind of combination because obviously later years of the war, Dr. King and Muhammad Ali are both, protesting the war. Why should we be serving another white man's war, killing brown people and such? What was your sentiments and all that when you started hearing that, being a veteran and so forth?
Well, I come from a family that they were a bunch of farmers throughout Georgia. But also, when my dad was rescued from the farm and he was drafted into the army in the Second World War, and he got to see the world. I mean, in Europe, all the places that people love to go to nowadays. He got it all expense paid free. But he had a tremendous love. He was a very proud soldier, and he imparted that to all the men in our family. Also, we had an uncle who ran away to fight with Teddy Roosevelt as a Rough Rider. He was killed in Cuba, and he's buried there on Cusco Beach. And I never got an opportunity to visit his grave because it's a turtle sanctuary, those giant sea turtles. So there's only a certain periods of time of the year that you can get there. So I never got an opportunity, even though I spent the many years I spent in Cuba. I spent 4 years down there, and I never got an opportunity to go over to that part of it. So the militarism has been big in my family. Every war that our folks have been free, they fought in, and we've all fought honorably. And I guess I'm the second to have a complete career, but everyone has served, and it's a sense of pride. My dad said, "Well, hey, we're Americans." They may not realize it yet, but we are Americans. And so that's where the pride comes in. And, my dad was so proud. I tell you, I spent 20 years in the Marine Corps. My dad wrote me 2 letters himself. He always commented when Mom wrote, almost daily. But Dad wrote when I made E4 and when I got my second commission, the commission as a second lieutenant. He realized that those were times when, to him, they were important. So, and I think that he was proud of me.
I've often, to this day, I'm still baffled by the fact that I understand why people went to war, and I understand why a lot of people, joined the Army or the Marines or what have you. But I'm still baffled by the what you just described as you felt honored to be a Marine, for instance, and you were fighting a war, and yet when you got home, you could be shot just for being in a car, or you weren't allowed to buy houses where you wanted to. Why did people go to war? Why did people want to fight? Why did you want to fight for this country?
Well, you have to realize that my attitude has been this: after the student movement was successful, anything I wanted to do, I was going to do it. And you can arrest me, you can shoot me, you can kill me, but I'm going to do it because I've earned the right. My family has earned the right. And what goes with that responsibility as being a citizen also means to serve. So that's my reasoning. I know that things were not perfect because even after I got back from Vietnam, I was denied service. Now they had just passed the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act in '64 and the Voting Rights Act in '65, and I came back and there was still pockets of resistance. But that doesn't mean I'm going to give up. I will fight to the bitter end. I mean, like John, to the very end, he's still fighting. And I think we just can't give up. But also, you can't hold the stigma and say, well, he didn't serve. We fought in every war. So that's why I'd say I deserve everything this country has to offer. If I want it, I'm going for it. I'm not going to be denied.
So the idea that if African Americans since the Revolutionary War were willing to shed blood for this country, then they deserve the rights therein.
Well, with every right comes a responsibility, and that's the way I look at it. So
You said your family, World War II saved your grandpa from the farm,
yeah.
but were they farmers? Were they sharecroppers? I mean, what was?
Okay, they were farmers, and then then they became sharecroppers because that became the way of life. And what happened is that they had I forget the year, it was what the old folks call a jubilee, but their crop was so bountiful, and so that year when they settle up, the overseer says, "Hey, John, you almost got out of debt." Well, a call went out that night that, hey, so all the men and all the vehicles they could get went down to Jasper County, and they loaded up everything they could, and they left in the dead of night. And that's how they got out of farming. And they stayed with them. Some of the relatives stayed with our family, and we just parcel out to others in the city until they could get reestablished. After a month or so, they got jobs and stuff, and they relocated. That's how we got out of farming, because they realized that no matter how well they did, there's no way they're going to get out of debt. If they didn't get out of debt that particular year, I mean, really, man, that year, it was, I mean, all the corn cribs were overflowing with corn. I mean, it was just, really, because we used to go down, on the weekends to carry feed for the hogs and stuff like that, stuff that we would get from the city, and also bring down a lot of staples. So we knew that this just should have been a good year for them. But, they ran the books, you got stuff from the company store, and it was just so unfair. I give them credit there. Those people, they could grow crops anywhere. They were masters at their craft. And it really is, I guess that's what we had such health in our family, because we did eat well, whereas a lot of other people, because of the animals they slaughtered, and they had the slaughterhouses and stuff like that. And plus all the other vegetables throughout the summer and throughout the fall.
Right.
So that really enabled our family, which we also shared with the members of our neighborhood. I mean, when we would bring stuff from the country to the city, everybody around the street benefited. So because that's how bountiful things were.
So in 2015, my mom and I came down to Atlanta, and we got a chance to meet up with you at the Atlanta Civil Rights Museum. And you're wearing this shirt, and the shirt on the front says, "I am African American." And on the back, it says, "I am not the enemy." And you're topping it off with your Marine Corps hat. To think that you have to specify that, in the 21st century, that being an African American means that you are not the enemy. What was going on then? What was going on for you at that time? That was that was so striking. I took the picture. I was like, oh my gosh,
Well, I first got the idea. I was watching one of the events that particular summer, where it just seemed like blacks couldn't do anything right. And there was one instance where a policeman body slammed a 14-year-old girl in a bikini because she was trying to go to a pool party. And there were other instances around. And I said, the idea is that we don't know the enemy from the good guys from the bad guys. And the thing is that just because your skin is black doesn't mean you're the enemy. We are involved in all aspects of American life and always will be. And then when we get American history right, people realize the contributions that blacks have made to this country. And don't assume, like it's, a traffic stop. But see, a lot of times it's not so much their attitude, but it's the gestures and the speech. They might not call you the N-word, but they'll call you boy, or you call an adult woman a girl. You can have a 80-year-old black man, he's still a boy or uncle. There is no all these condescending terms that they use against us. And see, I understand these are code words. You're not brave enough to call me a nigger, so you want to call me something else. And in my younger days, it wouldn't matter. I would smack you because I know what you're trying to. You avoid saying the N-word, but you want to demean me in some other way. And we don't have to have demeaning speech, whether you're a policeman or otherwise. We can be nice to each other. I mean, that's the least that we can do. I speak to people even now. And, if you don't speak, that's fine. It's your problem. But, well, why don't you reach out and I'm a pretty nice guy. You get to know me, and I'm probably a better friend than I would be an enemy. And it's a good thing I'm nonviolent, because if I were not, well, I don't know what could happen, because I think I have the capacity for a lot of evil. So, you know,
Yeah.
but I am not, the enemy. And, the thing is this, this is my country, this is my community, and I want to see all benefit and to be better. And that's all any citizen wants, is that get along with your neighbors. If I can be of help, if I can be a blessing to you, let me be your blessing. And if you can be a blessing to me, then I welcome it.
I think it would be different. See, people forget that things like policeman is a job, and is a job that is, so for some people want the gun, some people want the control, but it is a job, and it is not offered. Let me rephrase that. It is only in certain places that they want college educated, they want high school diplomas. There are places in Georgia or Mississippi or Alabama where a desire is enough, and you get about less than a year of training to be this policeman. And suddenly you're out on the street with a bunch of people that you never saw before. On the one hand, on the other is you meet a bunch of people that you never liked. You don't know why you don't like them. You just know that they're black and you don't like them because you were told not to like them. So I think a lot of it has to do with what we think of police, what they are, what their job is, how they see themselves. And in a lot of places, they see themselves as keeping people of color and poor people down. That's their job. Because the original police forces were the patrols that used to go through. There's nothing, maybe in New York or maybe in Atlanta or big cities, they are, they're changing now, but a lot of the people, they never liked us to begin with. And you don't know which one you're going to run across. I think that's the problem.
Well, they don't like us because they don't know us. And I think
Exactly.
once, when you get the conversation going and people get to talking, you realize that we're more alike than we are different.
Yes.
Because, like I'm born in the South, you were born in the South. And
Right.
we, even though we're miles apart, we share in common. There's a lot of heritage we share in common.
Right.
But likewise, if our white counterparts would get to know us, he realized that there's a lot of similarities there. But
Right.
because he chooses not to interact with us, he doesn't realize that, hey, we like the same thing. You might like hunting, I love fishing, or whatever it is. I mean, you find out you might be a great bowler. There's a whole bunch of things
Right.
that you will find that you have in common. But you'll never know that as long as you don't sit down and have that conversation.
Right.
Because we all have dislikes. Our parents told us things about whites, and I later found out that a lot of it's not true. And I'm sure that they're being told a lot of things about us that a lot is not true. So, but the thing is, when you have that conversation and you realize that, wow, and I have friends out throughout the world. And it isn't based on colors or anything like, but it's the things that we share a lot of things in about life.
Right.
Yeah, you mentioned hunting and such, and shooting, and these commonalities. And Levon and I were in Georgia a few years back, and he actually braved it enough to get together with this cousin of mine, distant cousin, leans in a particular political direction from opposing of ours. And we went shooting, but some target shooting. But Levon always made sure he was never downrange, changing targets.
I agree.
I don't know this guy. All I know is the minute I walked in his house, he started talking about guns. And he handed me an AR-15. And my daughter to this day asked me, why did you take the gun? And it's like you said, that's what he had to share. he understood my politics because he had just seen one of Loki's movies. He had just talked to me, so he knew my politics. But as a person, he figured, let's see what we have in common. So he handed me a gun. Then he offered to go shooting. Well, he didn't know, well, he found out that I'd shot a gun before. It was not that I didn't shoot guns. I just didn't, I was nonviolent, tactically. And so we went shooting. But I didn't realize that I never got in front of him with the gun. It was interesting. I just did this by instinct. I don't.
Yeah.
Loki says I didn't, but I don't remember thinking that this guy might shoot me.
Accidental discharge.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I'm really surprised because going to his house and he hands you a gun. That could have been an excuse right there for him to shoot you.
Yeah, that's true.
Grab the gun.
Yeah. He set up a little shooting range around this lake that he had built. He was a country boy.
Yeah.
I know he had been to the Army and the
Navy. He worked on naval subs.
Yeah, he worked on submarines.
Submarine.
But where he lived was all white. It was back in the woods, and he had the religious wife. He had everything.
Wow.
And I ended up in his house.
And they were preparing for the North Koreans to possibly attack this little town in Georgia.
Wow.
Yes. The reason he had a gun was because Kim Jong-il might show up at his house.
That's far-fetched. That is far-fetched.
I didn't say a word. I didn't argue that he may not. I just, And his wife was a target shooter.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he was showing me all the awards that she had won.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, well, that was brave. I can see a target right on your back.
Uh-huh. Now, it was interesting because he told me, he said, anytime you're in this neck of the woods, bad chance, but anytime you're in this neck of the woods, you stay in my house. And he meant it.
Yeah.
He meant it. But we don't agree when it comes to politics. We don't agree on anything.
No, absolutely.
Wow. I thought I've had some interesting encounters over the years. I think one of the most interesting encounters I had, the University of Wisconsin put together, they arranged with me to meet with the police chief, the one who arrested Dr. King and Rosa Parks, but also he was in charge of the Montgomery police when the Freedom Riders came there. And it took them a long time, but they finally released it on VMEO or something like that. They finally released that video, but I was wondering what happened. But what happened, I went to his house and we spent 3 hours there talking about his role as a police chief. And I found out that his kids suffered for an opposite reason. The people of Montgomery said he was too easy on King and the Freedom Riders, and they gave his kids a rough time. Wow. But he was just explaining to me that he says, look, that was my job. He's the reason I fingerprinted Rosa Parks. You seen the picture of that guy that's for fingerprint? That's right. Drew Lackey is his name. He said the reason I did it personally. He said because I knew my other cops would not show her and Dr. King the respect that they were due, and that's why he ended up in that picture, because he wanted to show them respect and not have them just treated as regular old convicts.
Now, do you think that's a little bit of revisionist history? Are you trying to make himself look good, or do you think he was sincere in that? I
think he was sincere because he was stood up. See, he was told that he was going to. If you remember the story about the Freedom Riders, when they finally left Birmingham to go there, they were supposed to be protected, but they got right outside of the city limits, and all of a sudden the police left and disappeared. Right. And the Freedom Riders became concerned because it had been such a pleasant ride. Someone said they even, took a nap. But all the policemen left, and they came into Montgomery, and there was no policeman there. Well, see, he had been promised backup because there was a hell of a time just even getting out of Birmingham. So he was stood up. So there he was holding the bag, and there's no way it was over 200 Klansmen, and over 20 students in his little small police department.
Mm.
So he was putting up line, and he wasn't, I don't think, trying to revise history. I think he was just saying that, hey, everybody got taken advantage of because the governor had promised him protection for the town and all that other stuff. But all in all, they knew that the Klan was going to have its way that day, and they did. Because Jim Swerve and John really got beat up pretty badly that day.
John Lewis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for part 2 of our 3-part conversation with freedom rider Charles Person. Please join us for part 3 of our conversation with Charles, and don't be afraid to get uncomfortable.